Test, test. Okay. I have one that says staff. I'll do that 2 letters.
That's it.
Okay, it being 5 o'clock, we will call to meeting the February 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Los Osos Community Services District Board of Directors. Will you join me with the flag salute, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could we have a roll call, please, Laura?
Director Forkray,
Here.
Director Gatchell, Director Womack,
Present.
Vice President Olhilsky,
Present.
President Sisenia.
I'm here. And so with that, we are going to adjourn to closed session. Anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9, subsection 2, D2.
If you'd like to make a public comment on closed session and you're online, please raise your hand. There's no public comment.
I did want to add, we did a revised agenda, so we also have an employment district.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I'd forgotten about that.
Just want to make sure we have that.
Yes, yes, yes. We have a couple of, thank you. Okay, now we will adjourn to closed session. 6 o'clock, okay. Okay, we will reconvene to open session. And could we report out of closed session? Ty Green is with us tonight instead of the district council Menery.
Oh, I do. I sound better with it off. Coming out of a closed session, the staff has been authorized to negotiate with and retain a lawyer who specializes in FEMA matters to try to help both us as a district for our own FEMA issues and to give us a better idea of what might be out there. I've already had talks with them, so I anticipate we will be able to conclude that quickly. We've also, Ron and I have interviewed, Ron's interviewed 3, I think I've interviewed 2 potential lawyers, insurance coverage lawyers who specialize in looking at insurance policies and to help the district determine what they should be getting coverage for and help with. We've decided on one and I've been authorized to negotiate with them and bring them on board so we can get this moving quick and get things, find out, understand exactly where everybody is as quick as we can. That's it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that last sentence. It's just to keep things moving as fast as we can. We get the experts in. Okay, we'll move on to general action item 6A, the approval of the fiscal year 2022-23 mid-year budget adjustments.
Great, thank you very much. As you know, we do this every February. We go back and look at our fiscal year budget to get things back in adjustment for like unanticipated expenditures or other things that we didn't maybe budget exactly for. Tonight, we'll be looking at funds 100, which is our admin, fund 301, which is fire, fund 500, which is water, and fund 800, which is our drainage budget. The other budgets are fine, so I wasn't going to go through those. We did provide all the information in the attachment to the report. So if you do have any questions, please let me know. So we'll start off with Fund 100. Really nothing too exciting here. Basically, we just needed to increase some of our personnel costs slightly. So we were able to decrease other costs and contract services to accommodate that, or services and supplies. I'm sorry, I had contract services there. And you'll see these summary slides at each of the funds, which will kind of help summarize where the money came from or how we adjusted those. So as you can see here, all our adjustments were budget neutral for administration. And I think I'll take questions from the board as we go through each fund, which I think will make it easier for everybody. So if there's any questions for Fund 100, I'd be happy to answer those. Okay. I will move on to fire. This one was probably a little more complicated. We did do an adjustment for revenue. If you recall, back in October of 2022, the board made action to move some of the Zone A money from fire to Fund 500 for our water resiliency project. We did make some adjustments in services and supplies and capital outlay. As I said, those were Zone A property taxes. We'd had some fire personal protection equipment that was slightly higher than we had anticipated, some paramedic supplies, insurance, and increase in our capital outlay. The overall increase for the 301 budget is about $57,000, and this is the way it lays out. There's the Zone A property tax, which we moved per board direction. Fire personnel protection equipment, $5,000. Paramedic and EMT supplies was $15,000. That was upgrades to our AED equipment up there at the fire station. Insurance, because we added a new fire truck, so the new fire truck's insurance was more. The bigger one was the capital outlay for the building condition assessment. We'd budgeted $50,000 and the actual cost was in about $82,000. So we did do some other various GL or line item decreases to help the net increase, which is that $56,758. And so the way that looks on the summary is we have that increase of, excuse me, about $24,000 in service supplies and the increase in capital outlay. Any questions there? And then you can see where the decrease in revenue is as well. Excuse me, if there's no questions, we'll move over to fund. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I have the reserves for each of these. Fund 301 reserves are quite healthy. We were able to replace the fire truck for cash out of our general checking, so there was no need to reduce our replacement reserve for vehicles. And as you can see, the other portions of the reserves are healthy. And as of December 31st, we did have just a little over $1 million in our general checking account. So Fund 301 is looking good. Now moving to Fund 500. We had just some slight adjustments in personnel. We did have to move some money around for services and supplies. And we did have a significant increase in our water quality testing due to having to do full testing on the new 8th Street Upper and the new Program C wells. And then a slight decrease in capital outlay, which I'll show you here in a minute. The overall net increase from all this is just around $30,000, which isn't bad for this fund since it's a budget's a little over $3 million. There's how it lays out in the general ledger line items. As you can see, electricity had gone up as well for 8th Street Upper well coming online. We had a slight increase for equipment and non-structural assets. We had to buy a new brine tank for a South Bray Upper well, which was supposed to have been purchased last year, fiscal year, but it had to carry over because of supply chain issues. And then you can see the big increase there for water quality testing. Quickly to talk about our capital program. We had an unanticipated project coming up as the 10th Street transfer pump, which came in about $41,000. To try to keep the capital budget even, we decided we'd like to recommend deferral of the heavy equipment storage building. We had $50,000 for that, and it looks like those are going to be somewhere between $70,000 to $85,000. So we thought this would be a good time to kind of step back on the storage structure and then slide in the transfer pumps for that project. And that has a slight net decrease of about $9,000, $10,000. Again, here's the summary that shows the revenue that was added from Zone A property tax and then the adjustments made in services, supply, and capital. There's no questions on that. We'll move over. Oh, sorry, forgot about these reserves. Again, we're very healthy here. We have quite a few, we've been able to maintain about that $2 million in capital reserves. We have money for vehicle replacements. And so we're very, again, pretty healthy here. General checking has rebounded. We have a lot of capital expenditures going out right now on our different projects. So it's good to see that it's hanging in there about at $1 million. Now I will move to drainage. And this one we're going to talk about in our next agenda item. And I decided that we'd go through and just do the minor adjustments that we need before we get into that in our next agenda item. Really here, it was just a couple of things. We had some service and supply issues, mainly gas costs. And then we have a capital project that was going to need a little extra money that's been on the books. So here you can see services and supplies is a little over $3,600 and the capital outlay at $3,000 increase. The reserves here, and these are going to change when you see our next item because these are as of December 31st again. And this hasn't changed much over the last few years. So we have about $234,500 total and about $395,000 in cash. Any questions about the capital? If not, that's my presentation, and I'll take any questions or comments from the public.
Yeah, let's take public comment on agenda item 6A.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're online, please raise your hand. And if you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. There's no public comment online.
Well, I'll entertain that motion.
Well, before there's a motion, Mr. President, if I could also point out that this was presented to the FAC on Monday, and the member that was there did make a recommendation that the board approve this. So this is the second time that two of us have seen this. So I just wanted to point that out, that there was a recommendation
Yes.
to approve. You were there, I know.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion. I recommend that the board approve the mid-year adjustment requests as presented for funds 100, 301, 500, and 800.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. We'll move on to agenda item 6B. Funding strategy for the Cabrillo Storm Water Basin repairs.
Yes, thank you. I have a presentation with a lot of numbers in it. As you know, we had the major damage to the detention basin on January 9th. I plugged in this picture to show this was the next morning after the incident. And I do want to emphasize that this report is just looking at the basin repair costs because we're having to move forward to try to submit something to FEMA for reimbursement for repairs on that. So going into the estimated costs, we have two phases to this. We did an interim emergency response, which was immediately after the incident, and we knew a storm was coming in the next 3 days. And so we had to mobilize quickly. We were able to get some consulting services, geotechnical and civil engineering services out there, and a contractor, which was amazing, since almost every other contractor in the county with tractors were mobilized by the county. So we were able to get a contractor out there to help us. And the interim fixed worked during that next storm on January 14th. We weren't anticipating a storm of that intensity, but we were still able to maintain or hold the water in the basin and release it out towards Petro Valley Road. So the estimated cost, we still haven't been invoiced for this yet, is about $125,000. To repair the basin, this cost, I believe, is going to go up this week. We've been talking more seriously about what those costs might be, but we're looking in the neighborhood of about $624,000. So you're looking about $750,000 just in our estimations at this point in time. And as you saw in, I think I have coming up here. So with what the estimated cost is, we wanted to build in contingencies because as we know, with all our capital projects, things have been going up significantly. When you think you have a good engineering estimate, it's way more. So we're thinking it's going to be around $900,000 plus for these repairs. As I said, saw in the last presentation for mid-year, these are the reserve numbers updated for at the end of January. So we're seeing a little bit more, it's about 34,000. So we're seeing a bit of an increase there. The main thing that calculated in here is that we do have a relatively large amount of cash for the drainage fund. It isn't, it's nothing like Fund 301 or 500 in terms of cash, but we do have about $674,000 in the fund. So when you're looking at about a $900,000+ repair, we still need to keep operating capital in there to continue operations of that of our drainage fund. So keep that in mind as we move forward here. So the funding strategy is to do interfund loans from Fund 500 and 301. That's why we're going to revisit the reserve accounts that we have here. I put green arrows by the ones that I think we could borrow from, and red arrows by the ones that I think we need to keep, especially capital outlay, because we have a lot of, like I said, the program Seawell, we probably still got close to $2 million in costs from that coming up. So here's what I would recommend as far as these are the categories from our reserves that we could do an interfund fund loan from. This is what I would estimate if we were going to try to borrow about $1 million. I was thinking we'd do Fund 500 for about 500 and Fund 301 for about 500,000. That may not be the case with the amount of cash that Fund 100 have. So when we get through here a little bit more, we can circle back to how we might want to do this. So here you can see the Water Quality Trust, the Vehicle Replacement Reserve, Basin Management Reserve, and Water Conservation Reserve. Those are ones that we really don't use much, especially the Water Quality Trust, Basin Management, and Water Conservation. So those would be easy ones to borrow from. Because we do have a healthy contingency reserve, we could borrow, I believe, up to $260,000 from that and still be in good shape. Alternatively, over in Fund 301, again, we have very healthy reserves over here. Public facility fees, those are kind of restricted, so we can't touch those. The capital outlay reserve, I'd like to hold because we are in the middle of doing a building condition assessment. I've seen the first draft and there's going to be quite a few expenses needed on the fire station. And there is money in the fire mitigation fund. So going back here, we could easily borrow this amount from each of those funds to meet that goal of $500,000. With that said, at the FAC and with public comment, these were the recommendations, and as staff, I agree with that. You know, we should move forward with the interfund loans from these funds. It was brought. Everyone thought use of the Fund 500s first, and then backfill with 301 funds as needed would probably be a better strategy. Especially then, we could probably just hit the vehicle replacement reserve in 301, and it wouldn't cause any problems with our cash flow up at the fire station and for our contract obligations up there. They did want the board to direct staff to, come back next meeting with a loan repayment schedule, interest rate, what we would charge for interest, a cash flow analysis for Fund 800, and then the appropriate documents and a resolution to approve whatever the board decides. And then I would like authorization to use Fund 800 reserves for emergency repairs as needed. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Could you go back to that last slide, please? I was at FAC, so I saw this, but I'm not. What does the last bullet line mean? I'm not, what is an emergency repair? Why isn't that coming out of the second line? What the
Well, what I'm
difference?
asking for, we have the reserves, the $241,000 in drainage reserves
Right.
that you authorized me to dip into those. I need a board authorization to use that money for any type of repair work that we're doing.
So that would be in addition to the funds from 500 and 301?
Yes.
Okay.
Marshall, I believe that's for immediate
Right.
expenses.
I know, that's what I'm trying to understand. So,
Yeah,
Yes.
I think it's for like right now.
so the
versus
things
that.
that we've already done, where we have the engineer on board, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you've already spent, I think he had 124,500
Okay.
that he needs to build something.
No, that totally makes sense then. So the second bullet point is down the road for the reconstruction.
Yes.
And the fourth bullet point is the interim. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Good
I
question.
just wanted to make sure I understood.
So if we have no more board comments or questions, we'll go to public comment for agenda item 6B.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're online, please raise your hand. And if you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. There's no public comment online.
I just have a quick question. Does the repair of the basin include plans for if there was ever failure again, the mitigation for how the water would be redirected? The engineering involved with designing a system that it wouldn't just come straight down towards our houses again? Am I making sense?
Yeah. Could you identify yourself, please, for the
Oh, I'm
record?
sorry. I'm Victoria Conant Weir from 235 Vista Court.
Thank you. Mr. Munns, do you care to address that?
Yes, this is unfortunate. The failure was definitely unanticipated, and that you would hope any design that we do would preclude any future failure. Because the basin was designed to have an overflow when it got to a certain level, but you're relying on the engineering to have the integrity not to have that type of failure. Basically, if we were going to have a failure, we wouldn't anticipate where that failure would be. We're going to be doing more analysis on the whole basin because of this incident. So there wouldn't be a way to redirect. You saw that hole, the gate, the breach. And if that was to happen somewhere else, I don't know if there's any way we could redirect water like that. Well, as I know where you live, you saw the amount of water and debris that came down. So I don't think there would be a channel large enough to contain that, right?
Nora Marchand, 1829 6th Street. And my question is, does anyone know why this happened?
I'll answer once you're done with the public.
Is
comment.
that,
Okay.
that's it?
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's it.
The best I can do right now is it's under investigation, and we should have engineering reports out soon from that.
Yeah, it's hard to move ahead with fixes until you understand what went wrong. Okay, if that's it for public comment on this agenda item, then we'll entertain, so we have recommendations.
Oh, can you go back one slide, please? Thank
Okay.
you. I move to provide direction to staff to move forward with the interfund loans from funds 301/500 using funds from 500 first, backfilling with fund 301 as needed. Also directing staff to provide the board with a loan repayment schedule, interest rate information, cash flow analysis for Fund 800, and a report and resolution to approve. And also authorize the spending of Fund 800 reserves for immediate expenses related to the temporary and permanent repair of the Cabrillo Stormwater Basin.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. We'll move on to agenda item 6C, review of the emergency contracting procedures that have been in place since the 11th or so.
Yes, 12th. Yes. Yes, and so this is something that we're required to do to keep our emergency powers in place to for the per the public contract code. And again, this was part of what I was explaining about us keeping these contractors going, consultants and contractors going, so we can expedite the repair and also stay within the FEMA guidelines for reimbursement. So I did want to provide a brief update from, and there wasn't much from our last special meeting, but we also wanted to provide an opportunity for the residents up there and others to provide public comment. The Recovery Center remains open. I was in contact with the county today. They think it's going to close April 14th, which is coming up. I'm sorry, February 14th. Thank you. Where did April come from? I think I'm going to be on vacation. Something like that. I'm sorry, February 14th. I know that's coming right up. My person I talked with up there, they may extend that time, but it really depends on how many people are moving through the center. We have continued to provide roll-off services and dirt removal up there. I know the roll-offs are being heavily used, which is great. Dirt removal has slowed down some, but I know there's still needs up there. Like I was speaking of, we are working on the design of specifications for the next phase of the basin. We're hoping to have that all completed probably in the next 2 weeks is my hope. We need to get some soil samples and geotechnical work before that design can move forward. So that may slow that down a little bit. And I know the big question is, when are we going to hear something? And we've been in contact with our insurance carrier, and we're trying to push them to get those reports and the adjuster reports, not only the civil report on the basin structure analysis, but also on the adjuster's report. But we have no new information to really help out with that at this time. I think that was it. So we can I can answer any questions.
I would just want to reiterate what District Council Green reported out of closed session, that we're taking steps to help move those things along and to provide as much information and help for the district and the residents as possible.
That's exactly what I wanted to bring up. Some of you came in late, probably missed the report out of closed session. We have authorized staff to hire 2 additional attorneys to help. One specializing in FEMA issues, hopefully to help the district deal with our FEMA recovery process and to advise us with whatever help we can get regarding the residents and their FEMA dealings. And the other to help us with insurance company, because we're just not insurance experts the way we're going to need an insurance expert. So hopefully within the next 48 hours, we might have contract offers out and signed on those kind of things.
And we'll report back out at our next meeting on progress on that front.
So no other questions from the board. We'll go to public comment for agenda item 6C.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're online, please raise your hand. And if you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium.
Hi, I'm Julie Quillen, 238 Vista Court. Again, thank you for the dumpsters. They're great. As you're going through, as you mentioned, there was counsel retained for the insurance and you're navigating this and trying to get things to happen quickly. one of the questions I've had is, I'm going through my homeowner's insurance and I'm like, we're going down this road of different no's, like we have to go here to get a no and then there to get a no. And the insurance, I think Representative Addis mentioned to go to the state insurance commissioner's office if we get a no from our homeowner's insurance. But my question is at what point is that helpful or harmful to the process that you all are going through? So if one of us goes to the state insurance commissioner, is that then making your process slower? Or is that helping make your process go faster? And probably isn't a question for tonight, but something to put on your list of things to find out is, in what order should we be doing things to help make your process go along as quickly as possible and not hinder that process? Like if we're going to all these different places, to not make that more complicated on your end as well. That was just one of the questions I had. And like I said, probably not for tonight, but just something to maybe, you guys are great about getting us information, so that would be helpful.
I can answer that if you like me to. Sorry, I'm not used to the buttons. If I were you folks, I would pursue everything you could
Okay.
as aggressively as you can.
Okay.
I don't think you'll get in our way at all, and we're hoping to all work together as much as we can. And I think you guys being out there may put pressure on people that we can't put pressure on. The more pressure we get on people to do something, the better it is.
Okay, great.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other public comment on agenda item 6C?
There's none online.
Okay, with that, we'll bring it back to the board.
So I guess since I've done this every meeting, I'll take this one myself. I recommend that the board adopt resolution 2023-06, reaffirming the delegation of authority to the general manager or his designee pursuant to Public Contract Code Section 22050 subsection B to enter into emergency public works contracts.
I'll second.
And we need a roll call vote for this, I believe.
Hello, Vice President Oholski.
Yes.
Yes.
Director Fourcroy.
Yes.
Director Gatchell. Oh, not here. President Sisenya.
Yes. Okay, yes. Okay, yes, it passed unanimously. With that, we'll go on to agenda item 7, public comment for items not on the agenda. If you would like to make a comment and you're in the room, come on up.
And if you're online, please raise your hand. There's no public comment online.
No online comment and no in-person comment. Okay. We'll move on to the administrative and committee reports. Our fire department report. And, before we get started, we've had, it's our first regular meeting, I think, since the incident. We've had several emergency meetings. Thank you. Your crew. Do you have any idea how many sandbags you filled? I guess in the first day or two, and then that Saturday when you were out there at 10:30 at night, putting them up in front of the K
Yeah,
rail.
that Saturday, we filled about 600 sandbags in about an hour.
Yeah, I thought you were the fire department.
All risk, all the time.
We just can't get all that on the truck door.
I can say from the members at Station 15, it was our pleasure to provide the service in your time of need. The community outpouring, the board members that were out there, everything that everybody working together, it was pretty heartwarming. I've been in some pretty devastating incidents in my career, and to see the community pull together was pretty awesome. It's good stuff. It's good to know that community still comes together and good things still happen, despite whatever differences we have in opinions and whatnot, we can all come together to help each other. So it was pretty awesome to see. So thank you to the community. This is the first time we're going to present the board report under the new format. As you can see from the written board report, it's a little bit different. I took the statistics out of it as to not duplicate the efforts. However, if you'd like them put back in as you process the information, let me know and I'll put them back in. The item 1 was typically me breaking down the incident numbers that we'd had and going into them a little more formally, but I figured I'd just describe them with the graphs first and then move into the actual report itself. So for the reporting period, we changed the reporting period from the 22nd of the month to the 21st of the month of this following month. The reporting period is now the first of the month to the end of whatever the month is, whether it's 30 days, 31 days, depending on what it is. So for this reporting period for January, we had 134 incidents as it pertains to Station 15, your fire station here. One call for a structure fire. That was a chimney fire out on 7th Street. No property damage there, no property loss. We did have a car fire, several other reports and other types of fires, dumpster fires, things of that nature, small debris fires, no vegetation fires. We had 4 vehicle accidents. We had 2 rescues, and I'll get into one of the rescues that we did have that was related to the storm. We had 1 medical call related to law enforcement where they call us out to check on maybe somebody that they have detained. 75 medical aids, and 5 of those medical aids were CPR related. So other hazards, low hanging power lines, flooding, power lines down, gas leaks. We had 13 of those. Other calls that don't fit in any categories. We had 1, public assist 28. One thing to note on the sidebar there is you have medic engine 15, medic engine 215, medic squad 15. During the storm period, we were able to upstaff medic engine 215 as a reserve engine to just kind of surge our capacity to be able to respond to incidents. And also as the frontline engine goes in for repairs and whatnot, we'll rotate over to the reserve engine. So that's why that's appearing on the report as running calls. Aid given to other agencies. We went into Morro Bay a couple times, and we helped out the county a couple times. I'd be out in the CSA or the 9I area. We went into the county area, and we went into the state area a few times. Aid received. We got some help from Morro Bay. We got some help from the Harbor Patrol. We got some help from the county. We got some help from the state, and we got some help from the U.S. Coast Guard in the reporting period. I'll go into the written report. So we responded to the Vista incident. No injuries, no deaths. However, there was significant property loss. We were committed to that for multiple days. I'm still trying to get out in the community and just keep a presence out there and see if there's anything that we can help folks with, if there's any messages that we can carry back to the district, out to any of the county services that are out there. If there's any way we can expedite, we're here to help. So we'll keep circulating through the neighborhood. If anybody needs us, just flag us down or give the station a call. We're happy to help. One of the high profile calls that we had during the storm was a water rescue that occurred. We had 2 people that were reported trapped out on State Park Boulevard and South Bay. And so upon arrival, we had state parks helping us. We had the Morro Bay Fire Department helping us, Morro Bay Harbor Patrol helping us. The San Luis Obispo County USAR team was out there with 2 members. And eventually we had to call the U.S. Coast Guard to assist us. Essentially what happened is two folks drove past our sign, past the road closed signs, entered the water. It was during the peak rains, and we had a large pulse of water come in. One vehicle, we were able to get the person out fairly easily and walk them to safety. The other person was a little more significantly trapped in swift water. We made multiple attempts to try to reach that vehicle and were unsuccessful. Eventually we were able, the person that was in the car was getting pretty antsy. So my guys, they decided to make a pretty heroic stand, and they were able to wade their way up to her, grab her, pull her out. And at the same time, the San Bernardo Creek was flooding, and there was a large volume of water that was over the K-rail on Highway 1. And the best I can estimate is at the time that Caltrans was releasing that water and clearing those culverts, we received that pulse of water downstream where we were trying to perform our rescue. My 2 members and the victim were trapped on the bridge that goes across Choro Creek, and we were only able to swim back across. We weren't able to get a boat to them. Fortunately, the U.S. Coast Guard was able to brave the weather, and they were able to get into us, and we hoisted 3 people off that bridge and flew to Sierra Vista Medical Center. So my hats off to the crews that were out there in the water. It was a pretty intense rescue. So all she had was hypothermia. And apparently, last I heard, she tore up her driver's license and said, I'm never driving again. So, but everybody was fine. And I'm happy that, you know, there was no injuries and the hypothermia that's curable. And hopefully everybody learned a lesson that day. So special programs and projects. So we've been meeting with the consultants regarding the building assessment. The report just came back. Came back after I'd already written the report, so I don't have anything to state, but I'm sure Ron can touch on that later on. But it looks like we've got a little bit of housekeeping and a little bit of work. So I've directed my staff to go ahead and take care of some of the low hanging fruit that we can do, go down to miners, get a couple things and take care of some stuff. So there's no major costs to the district. We've been participating in multi-company drill out at the South County Drill Grounds through COVID. A lot of the multi-company stuff kind of got shut down now that a lot of that's been relaxed. We're getting back into training. These are days where we go out to our training tower and we actually light live fire and get our crews in there and start working with that. It's good for this company because they haven't had a whole lot of opportunity to do that with their new engine. So it's good to get out there and interact with the other companies and put water through that fire truck and fight fire with it. But there's also a new standard operating guide and standard operating policy within the county for structural fire operations, fireground operations. And so with the different agencies within the county, we have to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. So when we go on unseeable fire, if I tell you that's a boat, then they know that that's a boat, or I tell you to grab a hose, they know to grab what kind of hose. And so that we're all speaking the same language and that we're working towards a common mission. So the County Training Officers Association, under the direction of the County Fire Chiefs Association, came up with a standard operating guide for structural firefighting in San Luis Obispo County. They modeled it after the Riverside County model, which is another CAL FIRE contract. That policy and guide is exercised several times a day down there and is vetted quite well, and it's been very successful for over 20 years. So we're in the process of training our folks on how to use that guide and that procedure, and the other agencies are doing that as well. This was just a San Luis Obispo County Fire specific multi-company drill that we conducted, but we will be reaching out to our cooperators in the near future. We have 5 homes in the Napomo area that we'll be doing live burns on, and our personnel here at Station 15 will be participating on that once we get the clearance to do those burns. So a lot of valuable training going on so that we can make sure that we keep providing good service to you. Let's see. Moving on, we purchased a new pickup truck. Haven't picked it up yet. The price tag was $67,565. We bought it from Perry Ford. We tagged on to a bidding process that the county fire department did through the county. And so we were able to get a vehicle, and the plan is that we have the utility vehicle that was due to be replaced. We deferred that for 2 years. That vehicle has roughly 70,000 miles. It is not a high mileage vehicle that goes out on a lot of calls, primarily for doing things like driving sandbags around or driving our boat around. So what we have elected to do in order to extend the life of the command vehicle that we have, that vehicle currently has 72,000 miles on it. We are going to move it into the utility hole, and we're going to put the new vehicle in the command mold. That way we can have the new technology available. So it's available for emergency responses, and it'll extend the life of that vehicle as it won't get as many miles put on. And it's still in good condition. It's a 2019. So we'll be able to extend the life of that vehicle out a little bit longer, and there should be savings to the district on that. That's also a model that CAL FIRE uses pretty regularly with our state vehicles. Typically the command vehicle will be the newer vehicle, and then as it hits a certain benchmark on mileage, it'll go into the utility for buying groceries and moving sandbags. So we also participated in the Monarch Grove Winter Carnival, and that was a successful event. Somehow, some way, magically, one of our windows broke on our fire engine. So you won't see the red engine out for a couple days. You'll see the white engine out again until we get a new window to replace it. So that's the end of the report. Any questions?
No, just thank you. Appreciate all your help and not only in the incident, but keeping up with the regular duties and keeping all of the balls up in the air while you're juggling. So thank you.
I'd like to thank you personally for what I see as a great report. I mean, I know that we're finally back out of the COVID situation, but I think the report was really, really good to give us an update on what our crews are doing and how they're progressing and learning. So I thought that was really great. And obviously I want to express my sincere and our sincere thanks to everybody in your department, and it was working with them on the flooding situation, because without you, it would have been really, really a disaster. So pat on the back to you and your crew.
Thank you.
Yeah, Matt Jenkins must be a proud papa. That's for sure. Yeah, thank you for your service.
No problem. And as far as the trainings and stuff go, if any of you ever want to attend one of those as a guest, just reach out to Ron and he can let me know, and we'd be more than happy. We'd love to have dignitaries out to come and see what we're doing. And that way you can kind of see what it is that we're doing, and we'll give you a full explanation and tour and whatnot. So whether it's the in February, I believe the third week of February, we'll be going back out to our burn tower, to our training grounds, and doing the same events that we just did last week. We'll be doing it again. And then the structure burns that we'll be doing in Apomo, as soon as I have dates on that, I'll let you know. But if you're interested in seeing something like that, it's where you get to see things at full speed with the smoke in the air and that type of stuff. So
It was really cool. Ron and I went last year. You guys should go.
yep.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the Sheriff's Department report. It's online. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, Sergeant Coy's here, Sheriff's Office. Again, I want to reiterate what the fire department said. It was really cool to see the community come together for Vista Court. We were up there, for several days with everyone, and saw a lot of people lending a helping hand. So that was very cool to see. And my hat's off to everyone for that. So for the month of January, it looks like we had 68 calls for service compared to 56 calls for service for the same time period last year. So we're up a little bit. I'm guessing, the storm probably had to do with some of that, or a good portion of that. We had 2 assault or battery calls, 43 general disturbance calls, 3 burglary reports, 5 thefts, 10 vandalisms, 3 mail thefts. And again, with the mail, I know some of the tax refund debit cards have been going out. So always check your mail every night and block it if you can. 0 phone scams that resulted in a loss, 18 suspicious circumstances, 88 proactive enforcement stops, and 45 preventative patrol activities, which could be foot patrol and just proactive patrols of that nature. And that's all I've got. Any questions from anybody?
Questions from the board? Nope. No, thank you.
Thank you.
California Highway Patrol report.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. So for the month of January, we had 6 total collisions, one of which was a DUI collision, solo vehicle, no injuries. Of the remaining 5 collisions, 2 of them were minor injuries. The other 3 were no injury collisions. One of them was a hit and run vehicle versus a parked vehicle, and we had no information on the suspect vehicle in that case. As you all have talked about, really the story for the month of January was the storms. On January 9th, we I'll try and oh, here's my video. I meant to hit this video box earlier. So anyway, there, back on the video. Okay. The story was the storms for the month of January. Just on January 9th alone, we received 542 911 calls on that day. On a normal day, we experienced somewhere between 100 to 120 911 calls. And on a busy day, we'll get about 220 to 250 calls. And I've seen that maybe twice in my about four or 5 years in the San Luis Obispo office. So 542 911 calls was quite a day. At any one time, active incidents on our busiest days, on our active incidents, we'll have about 15 to 20 active incidents operating at any one time when we're busy. Weekdays we'll have 4 or 5 active at one time. And then again, going back to the 9th, During the day at our high point during the 9th, we had about 182 active incidents going at one time. We were scrambling. We were call to call. We relied heavily on the fire department, on Caltrans, on county roads. I don't want to completely go Murphy's Law here, but what happened with Caltrans, their yard in San Luis flooded early that day. And that was the yard there at Higuera and Madonna where they go in to get their cones and signs, and they had absolutely no access to any extra cones and signs other than what they had out already. And so Caltrans really was faced with quite a hill to overcome, just getting roads closed, state routes in their case, and county roads was helping out as much as they could. But with the amount of closures that we had and as you all know, experienced the many road closures and things like that, we were really scrambling on that day. Let's see. So with that being said, I'm available for questions, and I appreciate all of your time.
Any questions from the board? Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much, sir.
You got it. Thank you again. I appreciate all your service, and have a good night. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Utilities Department report. Margaret, written only. Okay, we're going to go. All right. General Manager's report.
Yes, you get Margaret at UAC.
That's true.
If there are any questions about utilities department report, I'm more than happy to answer those. We just gave some basic updates on the progress of our Bay Oaks, formerly Program C well, and our transfer pump. Otherwise, I have a few items I did want to talk about that I have in my report. The fire station building and condition assessment were underway. We received an initial draft report this week, which outlines all the conditions that were observed by the various engineering firms, mechanical, structural, et cetera. The next step is to prioritize what we see in the report, and then they're going to assign dollar values on what it will cost to do the, like essential repairs and then other things that are deficient up there. So I don't have a dollar figure yet, but the report's fairly lengthy and very detailed. So I'll get more information out to you as I can. Had very interesting meeting with California Coastal Commission last month. It was a virtual meeting. They arranged it, asked several questions about the district, how we are doing in terms of implementation of the base plan and others. Very productive, and it was more of an information sharing. They indicated they wanted to interact more frequently with the water purveyors. I do believe they had a meeting with Golden State Water probably just a week or so ago, but I haven't talked to them yet to see how their conversation went. But it's good to open up that avenue of communication. If you recall, after our last month's January meeting, and we had the discussion about incorporation, one of the outcomes of that was for me to have conversations with like LOCAC and other organizations about how we could coordinate better to make Los Osos all it can be. Had a great meeting with LOCAC executive team. We have another meeting scheduled for next Friday, not tomorrow, but the next Friday. And given the disaster that we experienced, there's a lot of discussion about, well, how do we organize as a community? Because we were kind of dependent on ourselves for several, or at least 2 weeks before other agencies started showing up, minus CAL FIRE, of course, and Sheriff and CHP. They were out there as well. Another interesting meeting I was invited to was by SLOCOG. It was a climate adaptation plan for South Bay Boulevard meeting. They're looking at how climate change is impacting that important corridor and connection between here and Morro Bay. I was invited just because they know we're interested in doing an intertie project across South Bay Boulevard. And we discussed various opportunities that may present, not only for funding, but also improving that access across there for the future. And I always want to say, even though we've had this great rain and it's above average, we're still considered an abnormally dry. I think Margaret's report next month is going to show that our per capita water use has dropped significantly for January. But anyway, we're doing good, but let's keep it up. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Questions from the board? Oh, okay. Who was on that coastal commission call from the coastal commission?
Remember their names, Esme Wall, who's our local planner. And then there's two others that I'm going blank right now, but
Okay.
it was oh no, it was Joe Street, their geologist, Esme Wall, and then there was one other gentleman who was kind of the supervisor.
Okay. New names to me. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Chamber's not here.
Yes, the chamber's sitting next to you.
It's not what my packet says.
I can give a quick
Okay,
oral
please.
report. The chamber obviously has gone through a lot during the COVID situation. But we basically are moving forward. We had a meeting and we elected all the board members and we elected the officers for the board, which I will get to you guys in writing because I don't have that information available to me now, or available with me now. It's going to be very, very interesting because we have a lot of people who haven't been previously involved with the chamber, but they're like 2 generations younger than the current or the previous board, which was my age. So I think we're moving into the social media era much, much better with the change in generations in the officers. Jim Stanfield and I are still on the board, so we still have the connection to the history, but the majority of the rest of the board is all really, really younger people in their 30s. So I think it's going to be very, very helpful for the chamber as we move into more of a remote social media era. We had a ribbon cutting on January 26th, which was last week at Brightside Pizza, which I think everybody, do you know where that is? Anybody besides me? So yes, it's across the street from Celia's and, you know, where Nichols used to be. So they basically have the same situation, the interior layout with the bar and the pizza and the kitchen, et cetera. They did make one big change in there where all the games are in that game room up front. You used to have a quarter to play and now they're all free. So you take your kids. Actually, I was down on my knees playing one of the pinball games, but so yeah, that was very, very interesting. We had a really, really big crowd. I'm sure there'll be an article about that in the Estero Bay News because Dean was there taking pictures of it. So and then upcoming on February 11th, Saturday, next Saturday, we have our annual retreat where for the new board members and the younger board members, we go through all the bylaws and all the procedures and everything. So they're all up to speed after that. Because if you have a new board member that's never been on the chamber board before, we have to get them to understand that. So the retreat will be from 9 to 1 on the 11th. We're still looking for 2 board members. So if anybody's interested in that, we have an opening for either a 2 or a 4-year term. So if anybody's interested in serving on the board, just contact me and we'll go from there. So that's the chamber report.
Thank you. Let's see, Community Advisory Council. I attended last month's Community Advisory Council meeting, and of course, there was a lot of talk about storm damage most of the meeting. But Supervisor Gibson did come back from a day in Sacramento where he'd spent the whole day talking about homelessness issues and state strategy and help from the state trickling down to the local communities. And so that was kind of encouraging to see that there's other things still going on in this world, and that he was enthused about the workshop that he'd been to there. You've heard enough about storm damage assessments and updates. LOCAC had a discussion actually at the end, and I didn't catch all of it, but it basically had to do with what is LOCAC? What are we here for? What are we going to be? And I think those kind of discussions are always good because that is our community advisory council, our link to the county. And they need to be a vibrant part of the community. And actually, I guess a part of their webpage will be the link to the Los Osos Emergency Coalition. I think that was the new group that got put together. Kind of a offshoot from the Support Los Osos group that's been put together, trying to channel needs, requests for help, information on fundraisers, anything related to flooding in the community, not just Vista, but Pine Street as well. And that page I think should be up just about. I haven't looked at it yet, but it'll be soon. I know that Annette was eager to get some help for Support Los Osos. Okay, there it is. It's up there. Okay, that was the LOCAC report. Let's move on to Parks and Recreation Utility Advisory Committee. It basically was storm damage. We talked a little bit about keeping our projects moving, the intertie and some other things. And finance. Did you want to say anything about finance, Chris?
Yeah, it's the usual and then some. Lisa recommended, as Marshall said, approval of the mid-year budget. We almost didn't have a meeting because we didn't have a committee member, but she came a little late. And let's see, she recommended we approve the warrant register. She recommended that we receive and file the financials for December 2022. And one of the newer items is now we're doing quarterly and annual financial reports. So she recommended we receive and file both the fourth quarter and the 2022 annual report. And it was a good meeting.
Okay, no emergency services or basin management committee meetings this month. Any directors' announcements of district or community interest, reports on attendance at public meetings, training, seminars, conferences, that sort of thing?
We have our biannual ethics and sexual harassment training, which I've completed.
Oh, shaming.
You might get on that here shortly. It's due pretty soon.
Yes. Right now, while I'm thinking about it, just popped into my mind, isn't Saturday fundraiser for the flood victims at Grocery Outlet, the parking lot there? I think Kiwanis is putting that one on. Yes, so that's one to keep in mind. Midday, Saturday. Okay, so with that, we will go on to public comments for items on the administrative and committee reports and the consent agenda. But before we do that, does anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Yes, I want to pull 10J.
10J.
Because do we have to pull it for typos? No, we can change that.
I don't think so.
It's not program C on the top. It's water resiliency intertie.
Okay.
Just, it says as presented. I want to make sure we get that. So never mind.
Clarification. No. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thanks for catching that.
It's the engineering detail. Okay, with that, we'll go to public comment for the administrative committee reports and the consent agenda items.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're online, raise your hand. And if you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. There's no public comment online.
Okay, public comment here in the room? Okay. Okay, well, with that, I guess we can entertain a motion to approve the, accept and file the reports and approve the consent agenda.
Yes, I'll go ahead and make a motion then that the board go ahead and approve and file the administrative committee reports and approve the items on the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have, we do have resolutions, so we need a roll call vote.
Vice President Oholsky,
Aye.
Director Womack,
Yes.
Director Forcroy,
Yes.
President Cesenia.
Yes. Okay, what you've all been waiting for. The Brown Act training. This is a very dry presentation regarding the operation of public agencies. It's going to go into the rules about how we meet, what we can and can't do, what we can, take it away, Marshall. And no one's going to feel bad if you don't want to stay to the end of this one. I'm not leaving. Yes.
Sorry. Can you hear me okay? I think at the last time I gave this, which was at Utility Advisory Committee, Richard Markinson said that was the 47th time I gave it. So, and Richard's a number guy, so I'm going to have to believe he knew that. So
48.
this would be the 49th because UAC was the 47th. So the purpose of this is under the government code, we have to have annual training every year on Brown Act for all of our board members and our committee members. So the purpose of the Brown Act is it establishes the procedural framework for members of local governmental decision-making bodies to openly meet, debate, and act. It provides the means for the public to be informed about the views, discussions, and actions of its locally elected and appointed governmental representatives. An overview here, government officials are elected by the people, represent the people, and govern on behalf of the people. Key words here. The public needs to have the ability to observe, monitor, and evaluate its elected and appointed representatives. The Brown Act is designed to encourage public participation in local government. And I put this slide in here from day one, just because I wanted to have a little historical background for what I consider what was said in the Brown Act. But back in 1863, in the Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln said, "Government of the people, by the people, and for the people." And I think those are the key words that apply to the Brown Act. Just remember, I have to tell the board, you have a quiz at the end of 10 questions that we can't go home until you get it 100%. So remember, pay attention. So when we get to the questions, and for those of you who saw this at the Utility Advisory Committee meeting, I have to tell you, I've changed all the questions.
I don't believe you.
Well, Laura will tell that. Okay, so the history of the Brown Act was it was introduced by Modesto Assemblyman Ralph M. Brown more than 50 years ago. The legislature has frequently added to the requirements of the act over the years. Requirements are detailed, comprehensive, and complex. The legislature's intent, and when they adopted this, and this is part of the preamble to Government Code Section 54950, the Brown Act embodies the philosophy that the public agencies exist for the purposes of conducting public business, and the public has the right to know how its collaborative decisions are being made. The people in designating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. So openness, all meetings of governmental bodies which discuss, deliberate, and act on public business must be fully open and accessible to the public. Exceptions to the rule of openness are few and far between. So subject organizations to the Brown Act are all governing boards of local governmental agencies, which is what the CSD falls under, and advisory and standing subcommittees created by such governing agencies. So this is why our committees are all covered by the Brown Act, because it says right here, subject organizations. And then finally, all boards, committees, and bodies created by either federal or state law. So even if you're created by the federal government, if you're acting on behalf of the public in California, you're required to meet the Brown Act. So a meeting is considered or defined as any gathering of a majority of the board members, which is 3 out of 5, at the same time and place that involves any aspect of the decision-making process. So there are exceptions to that, which again, I said are few and far between. But first of all, conferences, training, and workshops, governmental forum, or pardon me, community forums and the meetings of other governmental bodies. For example, if you go to the Board of Supervisors, we can all go. Socials and ceremonial occasions, such if you came to our ribbon cutting for the chamber or the next ribbon cutting. Within these exceptions, board members must avoid talking about any applicable business while they are at any such event. So prohibited activities, and this is pretty straightforward, I think, but any use of direct communication, personal intermediaries, or technological devices that is employed by a majority of the board members to develop a collective concurrence as to an action to be taken on an item is strictly prohibited. So 3 board members cannot communicate about how to create a collective concurrence. Now, there's 2 ways that this is basically defined. There's a serial or daisy chain meeting, which is a series of meetings to develop a consensus. So I meet with Chuck, Chuck meets with Matthew, Matthew meets with Christine, Christine meets with Troy. That's a serial or a daisy chain meeting. So Chuck tells Matthew what we're doing, and then Matthew tells me, and we all come to a consensus, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And although the meeting involves less than a majority of board members, however, when taken together, this involves a majority of the board members. So a serial or a daisy chain meeting is not allowed. Now, the second one is a hub and spoke meeting, which is where a single board member acts as the contact point for the other board members. So we take, I'm not going to use names again. So if we take X as a board member and that person's in the middle, and then X talks to all the other board members, and then X develops a consensus between those, even though there's only a contact between 2 at any one time, there's still a collective consensus because there's a single contact point that everybody's dealing with. So if that single contact point communicates to each of them the other board members' positions in order to reach a consensus, then that person is a hub, and that's not allowed. Use of email, and this is a relatively new part. I think this has been in here 3 years, 4 years, maybe the most. Board member, and so they were way behind in adding the email, quite frankly, because email was out a lot longer than the legislature acted on it. But use of email, board members cannot use email to develop a collective consensus, agreement, or decision, or exchange information in the email about their views or positions on public business, or responses to any email sent to all board members should only be replied to the sender and not a reply for all. So this is one of the reasons that when you get an email, like in this particular situation, you blind copy everybody else. So I send it to Chuck, and then I blind copy, 80 other people But if, so there, you guys don't know who else. So if you reply to all, it's still only to me because it's only a thing. So you can hide the other people as blind copies if you send out an email. So for reply, okay, this one's a new one. We have the next two things. One was adopted in 2020. And the next part we'll talk about was incorporated and passed in 2022. So this is when here the legislature took a step into use of social media. So AB 992, which was passed again in 2020, modernized the Brown Act's provisions concerning serial meetings by addressing the use of social media by members of a board. Now, I'm just reading a summary here, and when we get to the next page, to me, it still seems like there's a little unclarity, but it is what it is, I guess. So AB 992 clarifies that it ordinarily does not violate the Brown Act to participate in social media and allows the use of quote unquote digital icons, i.e. emojis. This is where I put the one up there where guys sort of, what? In discussions on social media. So you can use digital icons in discussions on social media. Okay. Now, continued here, however, AB 992 also creates a bright line rule that board members may not respond directly to any communications posted on the internet by other board members regarding a matter within its jurisdiction. So for example, if somebody on the board posts something on Nextdoor or on the Facebook page or whatever, that is totally illegal for another board member to respond to that. And because the third board member or fourth board member could see that. So that's the rationale behind that. So this means, and this is the part that's a little confusing to me, but this means that a board member may post a thumbs up or other emoji in response to a constituent's social media post, but may not do so if the post is from a fellow board member. So if Nora puts this on social media, we can thumbs up or thumbs down. But if Chuck does, we can't. That to me seems a little odd because it seems to me you shouldn't be able to do it at all in public so the other ones of us can access it. But that's the way the law reads. Okay, locations of meetings. The majority of the board members must meet within the boundaries or jurisdiction area of the governmental entity with only specific exceptions, including the inspection of real property or meeting with federal state officials to discuss legislative or regulatory issues. So we could go if we were going to have a meeting regarding the disaster area. We were going to have a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors. We could go into San Luis Obispo and have that meeting with them because we were then discussing regulatory issues. If a board member participates by teleconferencing, okay, and this is the old rules. When we get to the next page, we're going to start the new rules. But so, and I'll explain the dichotomy here because now hybrid rules are, or pardon me, hybrid meetings are allowed, but it's a little bit different. So I've got to go through that. I've got what, 4 pages for that. It's a long thing. If a board member participates by teleconferencing, the location the board member is calling from must be noticed with an agenda posted and accessible to the public. Don't go on, Laura, yet. Okay, so this is if a board member participates by teleconferencing, and the hybrid exception that we're going to talk about does not apply. So you could still do it remotely, even if the hybrids doesn't apply. But if you use this rationale for doing it remotely, it has to be noticed, has to be agenda posted, and it has to be accessible to the public. So if you're on vacation in Hawaii and you want to do it remotely, that location has to be noticed. It has to be agenda posted out on the palm tree by where you're sitting, and it has to be accessible to the public. Okay, now. Okay, Laura. Oh, okay. The notice and agenda for regular board meetings must be posted in an accessible location 72 hours in advance and mailed to all those who request the notice. Special meetings may be called by posting a notice and an agenda at least 24 hours in advance. So that's a difference there. All right, the agenda requirements, it must contain a brief description of every item to be discussed. Descriptions must be clear enough to be understood by members of the general public. So even though there may be technical stuff in there, the agenda everybody has to be able to understand it. So if it's an engineering thing, an engineer may write it, but then the rest of us who aren't engineers may not understand. So it has to be clear enough. And lastly, agendas for the board meeting must include a time for public comment. All right, here we go into the fun one. This is the new law as of last year, and I think we've already applied this in one meeting where Christine used the hybrid meeting rules to teleconference. So she did not have to post an agenda. She did not have to make it accessible to the public if this hybrid exception applies. So under the new teleconferencing rules under AB 2449, which were passed last year, a board may hold a hybrid meeting as long as a quorum is in person. So there has to be at least 3 people here in person without having to comply with certain requirements, such as post agendas at the teleconferencing locations, identifying teleconferencing locations in an agenda, and making those locations open to the public. So those do not have to apply if you're using the requirements of AB 2449. So there's 2 limited circumstances where you can use AB 2449. The first of all, the board member has just cause, the family, for example, caregiving needs. I mean, you're with your father or mother and there's, have age issues and you have to just stay with them. Or there's a contagious illness. For example, if you have COVID, for not attending the meeting in person. So that's the first one, just cause for not attending the meeting. And the second one is that the board members are experiencing a physical or family medical emergency. So if you just fell down the stairs and broke your leg, I mean, I don't really think you'd want to call into the meeting, but you could. Or if, there was just some medical emergency that, you had to stay with your son because, you couldn't leave him because for medical reasons or something like that. And then the last part of this is in order for a board member to rely on the above findings to justify a meeting by teleconference, there must be a concurrence from the board members that are here in person. So if one of us decides the teleconference under AB 2449, then as part of, before the meeting starts at the very beginning, well, after it starts at the very, very beginning, there has to be a motion to approve that person coming in by teleconferencing. So if Christine wants to come in by teleconferencing on a hybrid meeting and rely on the above findings, she has to talk to the general manager. The general manager has to explain, I mean, it doesn't have to be 72 hours in advance, obviously, but the general manager then has to explain at the very, very beginning when we get to the roll call, which is right up front, that board member Womack has chosen not to attend and she wants to attend under the hybrid rules of AB 2449 for the following reasons. Does the board agree? And the board then takes a vote on whether or not they would agree with allowing that person to attend via AB 2449. So I just wanted to make it clear, teleconferencing is allowed without these conditions, but you have to post the agenda, have to post notice, and it has to be accessible to the public. Under these 2 conditions, then you don't have to do that. So
if Troy had wanted to join us tonight, it would have been teleconferencing rules, post the agenda,
Right.
let the public know. Since he wasn't sick, he wasn't using that as his reason.
Right.
for
Well,
being
unless,
away.
for example, I mean, unless he went to wherever
Overseas and got sick and
or he got sick, or he went to see, one of his relatives who was sick or something
Okay.
like that, daycare.
Okay.
Yeah. I went to see that auto movie yesterday over at Morro Bay Theater, where there was a story, part of that was about a guy that was, very, very senile and having to take care of him. And that would be a situation that would qualify under this. So. Okay, thank you. Oops. All right, we'll move on. We're ready to move on. Oh, I'm sorry. So under AB 2449, the board must give the public notice of how to access the meeting and offer public comments. So that's already on our agenda, so that doesn't really matter. And I don't know why they added this, but it's in there and it says avoid requiring public comments be submitted in advance. So you can't say, hey, we're having a board meeting and you got to submit it 2 days in advance. I don't understand. I guess that was sort of just something they felt had to be added because it was missing. Okay. The public rights, so the members of the public have the right to address the board members on both agenda and non-agenda items within the board's jurisdiction. So on our agendas, you can discuss each board item. President Stacina asked if there's any public comments, and there's also an item for discussion of non-agenda items. So there's 2 separate items on our agendas normally. If somebody is disabled, they have to be accommodated so they can access and participate in the meetings, and receive copies of all written materials distributed to the board members with the sole exception of privilege items. So if, for example, if we get something about litigation or blah, blah, that's privileged because that's not really needs to be out in the public and it has attorney-client privilege attached to it. So, but any other written materials that we get have to be accessible to the public. Okay, so this is the other new thing that happened last year in the legislature, and this one's very interesting. So there now is authority, specific authority about removing disruptive attendees. Before there was an assumption that this could be done, but now SB 1100 specifically discusses this issue. So SB 1100 amended the Brown Act to provide that a presiding member of a board, which in this case is Mr. Cecina, may have an individual removed for disrupting a meeting. Before removal, that person must be warned that their behavior is disruptive and that continued disruption may result in removal. However, no warning is required if the person is engaging in the use of force or threatening to use force. Now, I believe this was probably added or passed because of the January 6th incident, but this is now legislative code that persons can be removed as long as they've been warned, or if they're engaging in use of force or threatening to use force, they can be removed. So under the whole big picture here, enforcement of the Brown Act, there's civil remedies. So compliance with the Brown Act can be enforced by a civil lawsuit if somebody feels that way. And in most cases that I'm familiar with, and I know this happened with San Simeon where they were sued for violation of the Brown Act. You go to the court and you basically change what you did and make it comply with the Brown Act. And then, it's resolved and settled. And then they can declare actions void that are not in compliance with the act, if not cured. Again, that's the whole issue here. So you do something, the court could say it's void because you didn't comply, and then you can just go back and have the board vote and make it comply. And lastly, the district can be liable for legal costs and attorney's fees. Now comes the fun part, the 10-question true-false test. This isn't a secret test, this is a public test. So you guys have to come up with a consensus between the 3 of you. Okay, first of all, number 1, a meeting as defined in the Brown Act occurs only when some action is taken.
False.
False.
False?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a consensus here. Yes, you're correct on this one. Board members may poll each other by social media on any issues which may come before the board.
I don't think so.
Okay, you're good. 2 for 2. Any discussion between 2 board members of a 5-member board is considered a meeting under the Brown Act if the board members discuss district business.
False.
False.
Oh, you guys are doing well. have to change the questions again, Laura, I guess.
We've done it a few times now.
I've changed some of them. Okay, this is a new question because you didn't have this one before. In a hybrid meeting, all teleconferencing locations must have an agenda posted and be accessible to the public.
False.
False.
Correct. Any person may record an open meeting of the board by means of audio or video recordings.
True.
True.
Okay, a member of the public may address the board at a regular meeting on any items of interest to the public, provided the matter is within the jurisdiction of the board.
True.
Uh-oh. 6 for 6, yeah.
Okay.
No, I talked about this one in detail, so I know you know the answer to this one. The board may require public comments be submitted prior to the meeting.
False.
But now that you suggested it,
Okay, so 7 for 7. 8, the board chair may limit the amount of time members of the public are allowed to speak on matters of public interest.
True.
true.
Oh, you guys are really hot on this. I guess you must want to go home. or
Yeah, we're trying to
something.
move it along. Keep it moving.
Okay, number 9, the board may hold its meetings at any location it chooses within the county, provided the public is properly notified.
False.
False.
Yep, the meeting has to be within our jurisdiction. Okay, last but not least, warning is required before removing a disruptive person who is not engaging in the use of force, but merely threatening to use force.
False. The threat's enough.
Yep, okay, last page. You guys got 10 for 10, perfect
You
score.
keep saying that.
This is the
last
last page. It says concluding at the top. Board members are representatives of the people who have been entrusted to advise on governmental affairs. The Brown Act is for the benefit of the public that the board members represent, and the Brown Act must be taken seriously. Failure to do so can result not only in legal penalties, but more importantly, a loss of public trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marshall. I don't know how you managed to do that every year so many times.
Oh, yeah, you always mix it up a little.
Red and blue.
Future agenda items. Anyone have anything?
I have to take public comment on the Brown Act. If you'd like to make a public comment on the Brown Act presentation and you're online, please raise your hand. And if you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium.
If you get anything but snoring.
There's no public comment online.
Okay, now we'll go on to future agenda items. I think we're full. Okay. Any closing board comments?
I just wanted to thank district staff and Manager Munns and Laura and everybody for keeping things going. You have a huge amount of additional workload, so I appreciate all that you're doing.
Yeah, I wanted to thank board staff for all their efforts. As I said, the fire department and staff and for that. And I would point out to everybody, if you haven't seen the current edition of the Estero Bay News, I would really, really highly recommend it. I forgot to bring one with me, but when you open it up, the very, very back page has a whole bunch of congratulations and thank yous for the bonding and the community cooperation that occurred at Vista de Oro. And I think that, I mean, literally, I've cut it out and framed it and put it on my wall because it just warms my heart to read how that's all in there and how it acknowledges just the sense of community and the involvement and the pride everybody has in being a single community. So I really recommend, if you have not seen, if you've not seen that, go out and get into Estero Bay News and look at that last page. It opens up. It's just beautiful. So that's my comment.
Anything else? I can't say enough about staff, Mr. Munns. And you're going to see it again in the next few months. I know you haven't had a day off like this month, I'm pretty sure. This is not the way you want to get to know people in your community. This is not the way you want to do it. But I sure have seen some good things come out of this, and we'll get through it. Like we mentioned earlier, we're bringing on some help, FEMA help, some insurance help that can help us navigate places we haven't been before, because it's going to be a while. This is still going to be a while, but we will get through it. I'm pretty proud of our response so far, considering this wasn't anything anybody had in mind. And with that, we'll adjourn this meeting, and we'll be back in 1 month.